Hello everyone, my name's Carly Hess, and today we're going to talk about email etiquette.
She don't gotta give it up, she professional.
Now before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about why email etiquette is so important. It's an unfortunate fact that people will draw conclusions about your level of professionalism and your level of education based on how you express yourself in the written word, and that is never more true than when you're dealing with emails. I'm going to show you two email examples. The first example will be of a student who hasn't formally learned about email conventions, and the second one will be an example of a student who has adhered to email conventions. And I'm hoping that you can use some of these instructions as a sort of formula when you're drafting an email to your instructors. So here's an example of that first email. The student keeps it very brief and has some spelling errors and some abbreviations to ask their instructor what they need to do for their final project. Now, I've received emails like this in the past, and as an instructor, I definitely know what the student's asking. They're asking for guidance on their final project. What I don't know is specifics, so I don't know what the student's confused about. Are they confused about the format that I want the project in? Are they confused about the theme or topic of the project? It's not very specific, and so it doesn't give your instructor a lot of room to give you guidance. I hope you all enjoyed the email for this teacher. It's teacher@professor.com, which is now an email address that I want for myself. So let's look at that second email. The difference with this student is they have a subject that pertains to the content of the email. It says English 101 final project question. It's really helpful to an instructor, especially an instructor who's teaching multiple classes. They kind of get in the zone as soon as they read that subject. So you have a formal introduction. Your instructor may or may not be a professor, but in this case, we're just going to throw professor in there. An instructor should usually tell you on the first day how they like to be addressed. And then the student explains the context for why they're emailing their instructor. It says, I'm struggling to narrow down my topic for the final project. I'm majoring in social work, so I'd like to do a project centered around the topic of poverty in the United States. And you can see already how this is more specific than the first email example I showed you. Then the student continues to say, I've looked at the research databases you suggested, such as JSTOR and Ohio Link, but I'm feeling overwhelmed by all the information I'm finding. So what the student's doing here is they're not only showing some background for what they're looking for as far as guidance from the instructor, but they're also letting the instructor know that they've already pursued avenues to answer this question themselves. This is not absolutely necessary in every email you send to an instructor, but it helps them know, hey, I was listening in class, I've already tried these other options, but I'm still feeling kind of lost. And then the student asks the question directly. They say, do you have a suggestion for how I can narrow down my topic to best suit this course? Then the student thanks the instructor for their time, which is a good idea no matter what kind of email you're sending. People love to be thanked. And then you add your little sign-off phrase. This is kind of fun because you can personalize this to what you like best. To be honest, I saw someone else using the sign-off phrase best, and I was like, that sounds great, I'm going to use that. And then you just sign your name. So just to review the conventions that we saw at work in that second email, the student provided a subject that pertained to the content of the email. They provided a formal greeting that addresses the instructor the way the instructor prefers to be addressed. The student gives a brief background and context to their question so the instructor knows kind of where their head's at and what work they've already done. Then the student asks the question directly, they thank the instructor, and then they use a sign-off phrase and sign their name at the end of the email. Now again, that detailed formula won't work for every single situation, but you can kind of play around with it. So you can even abbreviate that to just putting a subject, a formal greeting, asking the question, thanking the person you're emailing, and then closing with a sign-off phrase. That's more typical of emails that you might send in a professional setting to one of your coworkers or to one of your supervisors. On a final note, I want to talk a little bit about the fact that a lot of times when you spend a lot of time crafting this formal and professional email, you might get a response back from an instructor that's significantly less formal. I can't tell you how many times I've agonized over what I'm going to write to my instructor and spend a lot of time making sure the email looks professional and formal, and then I get a response back from the instructor that follows none of the conventions I just outlined for you. So I could get something as simple as, okay, see you Monday, with no subject, no introduction, no sign-off. And the reason why that happens is another kind of unfair part about writing, which is if you've proven that you've mastered the conventions, then you can bend them. So in other words, if you have your PhD in English, then you have more freedom to kind of play around with email conventions because your level of education isn't going to be called into question as much. But it's good to always err on the side of professional and formal and then loosen up the conventions later. I hope you all feel empowered with all the tools you need to send out professional, formal emails, and thanks so much for watching. Right on.